Hello, welcome to my studio. After the previous video, a couple videos ago, where I talked about how important it was to learn all the skills and develop the skills and the theoretical knowledge, I guess not surprisingly, I got some comments and questions asking about, well, where and how is the best way to go about learning the skills and learning all of the theoretical knowledge. So I'm going to talk about that in today's video. So the first and most important skill, I believe, in terms of becoming great at creating art is learning to draw. And so I got a few comments and questions and emails from people about where to go to learn to draw, or what is the best way to learn to draw, or the best videos or books. So the basic answer there for learning to draw is this kind of like doing push-ups or running a marathon. If you want to learn to be able to do 60 push-ups in 60 seconds, you need to do a lot of push-ups. You can't read a book on doing push-ups. You can't watch a video on doing push-ups and get better at doing push-ups. Same with if you want to run a marathon. If you want to run a marathon, you have to run a lot, and you have to run for long training runs over a long period of time to get ready to run a marathon. You can't read a book on how to do it. You can't watch a video. You have to just do it. And it's the same with drawing. So that's the most important thing to take about drawing is you only get better at drawing by drawing. I remember when I was in college in graphic design, we had one of Toronto's top illustrators, Will Davies, come in and give us a talk. And then we were out at the pub afterwards with him, and he was imparting all this wisdom. And he said, who here wants to become an illustrator? And that was my dream at that time. So hands up, along with a bunch of other people. And he said, well, I'll tell you the secret to becoming a great illustrator. And he said, draw your ass off. We were all waiting for this super kind of easy kind of shortcut. But there's no shortcut. There wasn't back then, and there isn't now. So the only way to get good at drawing is by drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing. Now, there are things you can do, dedicated exercises to improve your drawing skill. So I'll talk a little bit about some of those. So one of the most important things is to draw every day when you're trying to improve. And even when I was in college, we had to keep a sketchbook, and we had to do like one 15 or 20 minute sketch every day on our own time, on top of whatever else we had assignments from our classes. And that is still the best way to learn how to draw, is to just draw. And it doesn't really matter what you draw, whether you're drawing just whatever's on the table in front of you, whether you're drawing from a photo in a magazine, whether you're drawing a person sitting across from you on the subway, whether you're drawing from a book on life drawing poses. It doesn't really matter what, just drawing. The act of drawing, because what you're doing is you're training your eye and your mind to break down that physical world that we see into shapes, colors, values, edges, lines. And then you're training your hand and your mind to work together to put that on a two-dimensional surface. And it just gets better by exercising it over and over and over again. So that's the most important thing. Again, it's like if you're trying to work out and get in shape, it's not important that you have the absolute best workout kind of system set up. It's more important that you do it every day. And whatever it is you do, if you do it every day, you will get in good shape. And it's the same kind of thing with drawing. Now, there are certain things, I'm just going to go into them briefly. There are certain things you can do to improve your drawing skills, certain exercises. So one of them is called a blind contour drawing. And that is where you have your paper set up in front of you and a pencil on the paper, and you just look at your subject, whatever it is, and you pretend that the pencil is tracing the outline of the subject. And so you do it without looking at the actual paper. And you'll get some pretty weird, abstracted looking drawings out of that. But it's really good at training your eye and your hands to kind of work together without actually looking at what you're doing. Now, these aren't meant for things that are going to be framed and sold. This is just doing an exercise to help your eye and your hand kind of work together and to get your eye to really see contours of things in front of you. Now, another thing that's really helpful is gesture drawings. And any of you have taken life drawing will know this, and that's where you do quick little drawings in less than a minute to capture the gesture of a figure pose. And so it's done, it can be done with line, it can be done with conte, with shape, but it's just the important thing is it's making you draw really, really quickly to try and capture the essence of a pose. And that becomes very important down the road because in painting, as you've heard me say before, suggesting something is much more effective than rendering it. So gesture drawings really help you capture the suggestion of something with a few strokes instead of rendering it with thousands of strokes. So I'll talk a little bit too just about my background of how I became good at drawing, and it started really, really young for me. I can remember being 4 or 5 years old, and I was really into the Charlie Brown comics, and that's how I started drawing. I actually started copying Charlie Brown and Lucy and Linus and doing these very, very crude imitations of Charles Schulz's illustrations of the Peanuts gang. And from there, I actually moved into doing copies of the comic books, the superhero comic books. And that's pretty much all I drew when I was a kid. I would just copy the Spider-Man, the Superman, the Batman. And then I started, when I started reading novels, I was actually into the heroic fantasy type novels, mainly because of the illustrations on the covers. So those were Frank Frazetta, Boris Vallejo, those were two of my favorites. So then I started copying the illustrations that were on the covers of the books, just in pencil at first, and then gradually started doing them in paint. Again, this is when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, just because I loved those illustrations, and I wanted to copy them, and I loved drawing. And then when I got into the art program at my high school, then my earnest art education really began. So then I had life drawing like 2 or 3 times a week. We had an illustration class, a media and techniques class, layout and lettering, and then there was just the general art option class. But that was my first real introduction to any sort of structured learning of how to draw. And so I would also recommend for any of you out there that aside from the sketchbook and aside from just drawing as much as you can, whenever you can, getting involved in some sort of a life drawing class is a really, really good way because there is still nothing as challenging as drawing the human figure from life. And as I said, when you get into a life drawing class, they typically have the gesture drawings. They'll have shorter poses and longer poses. But you're also surrounded by other people who are very keen to either learn drawing, or you will have some there who are probably very good at drawing you can also learn from. But the nice thing about the human figure is even someone who knows nothing about art, they can look at a figure you've drawn and they can tell you whether it's right or whether there's something wonky with the knee or with the hand or whatever. So it's a great way to challenge yourself and to test your skills, because once you can draw the human figure from life and draw it very well, then you can draw anything. But the real secret to drawing is just time spent drawing. So I would recommend you always have paper and pencil with you. And it's amazing how much time we all have during any given day when we are wasting time. Whether you're sitting on the train going into work, or you're sitting at home watching TV, or you're just kind of whatever. But any time you have 10 or 15 minutes, you can spend that time drawing instead of just waiting or watching YouTube videos or whatever. So watching the videos, so watching my videos and other videos, while that can be really helpful, the majority of the time should be spent doing. If you're watching 3 hours of videos a week and you're only drawing or painting 1 hour, you've got it really, really backwards. You should be drawing or painting much more than you're watching. Another thing is reading. As I mentioned before, I was a voracious reader of a number of different art magazines, and that's great for getting suggestions of different techniques and different ways that different people approach painting. And I also recommend that the more that you can get knowledge about art, about the artistic process, about the various media that's available, the better off you will be. And then when we get to composition, so for composition, obviously I've got a series on composition, and there's a 2 or 3 part video with Brooke where I went into the whole thing. But there are 2 really good books on composition that I would recommend. And so one is by Frank Webb, who's an amazing watercolor painter who, again, kind of revolutionized watercolor painting back in the mid part of the 20th century. And his book is called Strengthen Your Paintings Through Dynamic Composition. And that's a fabulous book. And then Harley Brown, who's a Canadian artist who has a monthly column in every International Artist magazine. He has a book called Eternal Truths Every Artist Should Know. And that's also about composition and about the way the eye moves through a painting. And both of those books are not kind of read it once and set it aside. Both of those books are books that I've probably read each book 50 times. And it's one of those things that every once in a while it's worth pulling it out and just reading through it, because this stuff doesn't stick the first time you read it, or you can only absorb a little bit of information at any given time, and you're going to absorb what's the next most relevant thing that you need to take into account when you're painting, and a lot of the other stuff is just going to go over your head, or you just can't kind of ingest all of it at once. So both of those books, I would say, are things that you should watch or that you should read over and over and over again. And the same with my series on composition. It's kind of like if you've watched it once, the only time you're ready to kind of quit either reading those books on composition or the videos that I've done on composition is when you can stand up in front of a group of people and just by rote cover all of that stuff, that it's all just right at the tip of your tongue, ready to access, because that's where it needs to be when you're painting. It's not something that, I could take a test and get 80% on it. It's something that you need to have available at the RAM here in your brain the entire time you're painting. And so you don't get that just by reading it once or by kind of just taking in a little bit, because all of that stuff is very important in every painting that you do. So I guess that's it on that. But the big thing with any sort of thing to do with art, the technical knowledge, the theoretical knowledge, and the different concepts, those are things you can learn from watching videos, from reading books, and then putting into place. But the actual physical skills, so whether it be doing a gradated wash, whether it be capturing light and shadow, whether it be improving your brushwork or whatever, any of the skills that involve your hand putting a mark on the page, the only way you get better at that is by doing. You can watch 1,000 hours of video on how to draw, and that will not have improved your drawing skill one little bit. 1,000 hours of drawing, regardless of what it is you're drawing, that will improve your drawing by a large margin. So I hope you found this helpful. Oh, one last thing. I don't even know if I've mentioned it on the YouTube channel. We're starting to really promote it on my other social media. I have a solo show coming up in Toronto on next Friday, August 15th. And this is actually a pop-up art gallery. So it's a commercial art gallery space that's available as a retail pop-up store. So we've rented the gallery. We've kind of been planning this for about 6 or 7 months. So I'm having a solo show. It opens next Friday, August 25th. At 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. is the opening, and then we're going to be open throughout that week until the following Wednesday. And if you want to get the details, you can go to my website at www.timpacker.com. But it's on Dundas Street West near Roncesvalles. So if any of you out there are local to the Toronto area and you want to drop in and see me, we'll be there. I'll be there at the opening, obviously, but I'll also be there every day that the show is on. So maybe I'll run into some of you there. So if you like this, give me a thumbs up. I welcome your comments and questions. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I'm Tim Packer, and I thank you for your time.